Chapter 21 The Girl of My Dreams. That bow was from the world I wanted out of, while the strutting sequin partnership I had with Radine was exactly how I wanted my life to go. My path through the next few years can be traced by its relationship to hers. It was a classic situation. In many ways, we had started even. Poor whites from West Texas, her family was so badly off, sometimes she'd come to school with no lunch and no money, and we would split whatever I had brought along. At the same time, we were both getting all this attention together with the drum and bugle corps. After 3 years at our junior high school in a ghetto neighborhood that included many Asians, blacks, Mexicans, and other white migrants from the South, we had ended up close to being social equals. We stayed best friends until we moved to Long Beach Polytechnic. There, everything changed. Our paths diverged. She was asked to join high school sororities. The question of whether or not I should be asked was never even raised. The boys I had crushes on would not ask me out. They would flirt with me in the hallways or meet me after school, but they would ask Radine to the dances, or someone like Radine, someone they could safely be seen with. Meanwhile, she graduated from baton twirling to song girl, a much more prestigious position in those days. It was unthinkable for a Nisei to be a song girl. Even choosing me as a majorette created problems. The band teacher knew I had more experience than anyone else competing that year, and he told me so. But he was afraid to use me. He had to go speak to the board about it and to some of the parents to see if it was allowable for an Asian to represent the high school in such a visible way. It had never happened before. I was told that this inquiry was being made, and my reaction was the same as when I tried to join the Girl Scouts. I was apologetic for imposing such a burden on those who had to decide. When they finally assented, I was grateful. After all, I was the first Asian majorette they've ever had. Even if my once enviable role was now seemed vaguely second-rate, still I determined to try twice as hard to prove they'd made the right choice. This sort of treatment did not discourage me. I was used to it. I expected it, a condition of life. What demoralized me was watching Radine's success. We had shared everything, including all the values I'd learned from the world I wanted into. Not only standards of achievement, but ideas about how a girl should look and dress and talk and act. The ideas of male beauty, which is why so many of the boys I liked were Caucasian. Because I so feared never being asked, I often simply made myself unavailable for certain kinds of dates. If one of them had asked me, of course, I would have been mortified. That would mean coming to Cabrillo Homes to pick me up, and the very thought of one of his daughters dating a Caucasian would have started Papa raving. He would have chased the fellow across the grass. This was my dilemma. Easy enough as it was to adopt white American values, I still had a Japanese father to frighten my boyfriends and a Japanese face to thwart my social goals. I never wanted to change my face or to be someone other than myself. What I wanted was the kind of acceptance that seemed to come so easily to Radine. To this day, I have a recurring dream which fills me each time with a terrible sense of loss and desolation. I see a young, beautifully blonde and blue-eyed high school girl moving through a room full of others her own age, much admired by everyone, men and women both, myself included, as I watch through a window. I feel no malice towards this girl. I don't even envy her. Watching, I am simply emptied, and in the dream, I want to cry out because she is something I can never be, some possibility in my life that can never be fulfilled. It is a schoolgirl's dream, one I tell my waking self I've long since outgrown, yet it persists. Once or twice a year, she will be there, the boyfriend-surrounded queen who's passed me by. Surely her example spurred me on to pursue what now seems ludicrous, but at the time was the height of my post-Manzanar ambitions. It didn't happen in Long Beach. There I felt defeated. I watched Radine's rise, and I knew I could never compete with her. Gradually, I lost interest in school and began hanging out on the streets. I would probably have dropped out for good, but it was just about this time that Papa decided to go back into farming and finally moved us out of Cabrillo Homes. A few months later, he had almost killed himself on a combination of whiskey and some red wine made by an Italian drinking buddy of his. He had been tippling steady for 2 days. Then he started vomiting blood from his mouth and nose. This sobered him up permanently. He never touched alcohol again. After that, he pulled himself together, and when the chance came along to lease a sharecrop, 100 acres from a big strawberry grower up north in Santa Clara Valley, he took it. That's where he stayed until he died, raising premium berries outside of San Jose. I was a senior when we moved. In those days, 1951, San Jose was a large town but not yet a city. Coming from the big high school in Southern California gave me some kind of shine, I suppose. It was a chance to start over, and I made the most of it. By the spring of that year, when it came time to elect the annual carnival queen from the graduating seniors, my homeroom chose me. I was among 15 girls nominated to walk out for inspection by the assembled student body on voting day. I knew I couldn't beat the other contestants at their own game, that is, look like a Bobby Soxer. Yet neither could I look too Japanesey. I decided to go exotic with a flower print sarong, black hair loose, and a hibiscus flower behind my ear. When I walked barefooted out onto the varnished gymnasium floor behind the filled bleachers, the howls and whistles from the boys were double what had greeted any of the other girls. It sounded like some winning basket had just been made in a game against our oldest rivals. It was pretty clear what the outcome would be, but ballots still had to be cast and counted. The next afternoon, I was standing outside my Spanish class when Leonard Rodriguez, who sat next to me, came hurrying down the hall with a revolutionary's fire in his eye. He helped out each day in the administration office. He had just overheard some teachers and a couple of secretaries counting up the votes. "They're trying to stuff the ballot box," he whispered loudly. "They're fudging on the tally. They're afraid to have a Japanese girl be queen. They've never had one before. They're afraid of what some of the parents will say." He was pleased he had caught them, and more pleased to be telling me this, as if some long-held suspicion of conspiracy had finally been confirmed. I shared it with him. Whether this was true or not, I was prepared to believe that teachers would stuff the ballot box to keep me from being queen. For that reason, I couldn't afford to get my hopes up. I said, "So what?" He leaned toward me eagerly with final proof. "They want Lois Carson to be queen. I heard them say so." If applause were any measure, Lois Carson wasn't even in the running. She was too slim and elegant for beauty contests. But her father had contributed a lot to the school. He was on the board of trustees. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and at that point, her name might as well have been Radine. I was ready to capitulate without a groan. "If she doesn't make the carnival queen this year," Leonard went on smugly, "she'll never be queen of anything else for the rest of her life. Let her have it then if she wants it so much." "No, we can't do that. You can't do that." I could do that very easily. I wasn't going to be caught caring about this or needing it, the way I needed the majorette position. I already sensed, though I couldn't have said why, that I would lose either way, no matter how it turned out. My face was indifferent. "How can I stop them from fudging?" I said. "Is that what they want? If that's what they want to do?" He hesitated. He looked around. He set his brown face. "My champion." "You can," he said, "but I can." He turned and hurried away toward the office. The next morning he told me he had gone in there and raised holy hell, threatening to break this news to the student body and make the whole thing more trouble than it could ever be worth. An hour later, the announcement came over the intercom that I had been chosen. I didn't believe it. I couldn't let myself believe it. But for the classmates who had nominated me, I had to look overjoyed. I glanced around at Leonard and he winked, shouting and whooping now with all the others. At home that evening, I brought this news. No one whooped. Papa was furious. I had not told him that I was in running for queen. There was no use mentioning it until I had something to mention. He asked me what I had worn on the tryouts. I told him. "No wonder those Hajin boys votes for you," he said. He shouted, "It is just like those majorette clothes you wear in the streets, showing off your body. Is that the kind of queen you want to be?" I didn't say anything when Papa lectured. You listened. If anyone spoke up, it would be Mama trying to mediate. "Coach," she said now, "these things are important to Jeannie. She is important? I'll tell you what is important. Modesty is important. A graceful body is important. You don't show your legs all the time. You don't walk around like this." He did an imitation of a girl's walk, with shoulders straight, an assertive stride, and lips pulled back in a baboon's grin. I started to laugh. "Don't laugh. This is not funny. You become this kind of woman, and what Japanese boy is going to marry you? Tell me that. You put on tight clothes and walk around like Jean Harlow, and the Hakajin boys make you the queen, and pretty soon you end up marrying a Hakajin boy." He broke off. You could think of no worse end result. He began to stomp back and forth across the floor, while Mama looked at me cautiously with a glance that said, "Be patient, wait him out. After he's spoken his piece, you and I can talk sensibly." He saw this and turned on her. "Hey, how come your daughter is 17 years old, and if you put a sack over her face, you couldn't tell she was Japanese from anybody else on the street?" "Ko," Mama said quietly. "Jeannie's in high school now. Next year, she's going to college. She's learning other things. Listen to me. It's not too late for her to learn Japanese ways of movement. The Buddhist church in San Jose gives Adori classes twice a week. Jeannie, I want you to phone the teacher and tell her you are going to start taking lessons. Mama has kimonos you can wear. She can show you things too. She used to know all the dances. We have pictures somewhere." "Mama, what happened to all those pictures?" I had seen them, photos of Mama who had lived when she lived in Spokane. 12 years earlier, and her round face blanched with rice powder. I remember the afternoon I spent with the incomprehensible old geisha at Manzanar. Papa, I complained. Don't make faces. You want to be a carnival queen? I'll tell you what. I'll make a deal with you. You can be the queen if you start Adori lessons at the Buddhist church as soon as school is out. He stood there, hands on hips, glaring at me and not at all satisfied with this ultimatum. It was far too late for Adori classes to have any effect on me, and Papa knew this, but he owed it to himself to make one more show of resistance. When I signed up a few weeks later, I lasted about 10 lessons. The teacher herself sent me away. I smiled too much and couldn't break the habit. Like a majorette before the ever-shifting sidewalk crowd, I smiled during performances, and in Japanese dancing that is equivalent to a concert violinist walking on stage in a bathing suit. Papa didn't mention my queenship again. He just glared at me from time to time with great distaste, as if I had betrayed him. Yet in that glare I sometimes detected a flicker of approval, as if this streak of independence, this refusal to be shaped by him, reflected on his own obstinance. At least these glances seemed to say she had inherited that. Mama, of course, was very proud. She took charge and helped me pick out the dress I would wear for the coronation. We drove to San Jose and spent an afternoon in the shops downtown. She would take time for such things now that Papa was working again. This was one of the few days she and I ever spent together, just the two of us, and it confirmed something I had felt since early childhood. In her quiet way, she had always supported me, alongside of or underneath Papa's demands and expectations. Now she wanted for me the same thing I thought I wanted. Acceptance in her eyes was simply another means for survival. Her support and Papa's resistance had one point in common. Too much exposure was unbecoming. All the other girls, my 4 attendants, were going strapless. Mama wouldn't allow this. By the time we finished shopping, I had begun to agree with her. When she picked out a frilly ball gown that covered almost everything and buried my legs under layers of ruffles, I thought it was absolutely right. I had used a low-cut sarong to win the contest, but once chosen, it would be a white-gowned figure out of Gone with the Wind. I would be respectful. On coronation night, the gym was lit like a church with bleachers in half dark and a throne at one end, flooded brightly from the ceiling. The throne was made of plywood, its back shaped in a fleur-de-lis, all covered with purple taffeta that shone like oily water under moonlight. Bed sheets were spread to simulate a wide white carpet the length of the gym, from the throne to the floor of the girls' locker room, where, with my attendants, we waited for the PA system to give us our musical cue. Lois Carson, the trustee's daughter, was one of them. She wore a very expensive strapless gown and a huge orchid corsage. Her pool brown shoulders glowed in the harsh bulb light above the lockers. "Oh, Jeannie," she had said as we took off our coats, "what a marvelous idea." I looked at her inquisitively. "The high neck," she explained, studying my dress. "You look so sedate, just perfect for a queen." As the other girls arrived, she made sure they all agreed with this. "Don't you wish you'd thought of it?" she would say. And then to me, during a silence she felt obliged to fill, "I just love Chinese food." The others exclaimed they loved Chinese food too. And we talked about recipes and restaurants until the music faded in. "Girl of my dreams, I love you. Honest I do. You are so sweet." It swelled during the opening bars to cover all other sounds in the gym. I stepped out into blue light that covered the first sheet, walking very slowly like you do at weddings, carrying against the white bodice of my gown a bouquet of pink carnations. A burst of applause resounded beneath the music, politely enthusiastic, followed by a steady murmur. The gym was packed and the lights were intense. Suddenly it was too hot out there. I imagined that they were all murmuring about my dress. Then the girls behind me They saw the girls behind me staring at it. The throne seemed blocks away, and now the dress was stifling me. I had never worn such an outfit. It was not at all what I should have had on. I wanted my sarong, but then thought, no, that would have been worse. Papa hadn't been right about the sarong. Maybe he was right about everything. What was I doing out there anyway, trying to be a carnival queen? The teachers who counted the votes certainly didn't think it was a good idea. Neither did the trustees. The students wanted me, though. Their votes proved that. I kept walking my processional walk, thinking of all the kids who had voted for me, not wanting to let them down, although, in a way, I had already had. It wasn't a girl in this old-fashioned dress they had voted for. But if not her, who had they voted for? Somebody I wanted to be, and wasn't. Who was I then? According to the big wall speakers, now saxophoning through the gym, I was the girl of somebody's dream. "Since you've been gone, dear, life doesn't seem the same. Please come back again." I looked ahead at the throne. It was even further away, a purple carriage receding as I approached. I glanced back. My four attendants seemed tiny. Had they stopped back there? Afterward, there would be a little reception in one of the classrooms, punch and cookies under fluorescent tubes. Later, at Lois Carson's house, there'd be a more intimate, less public gathering, which I had overheard mention of but wouldn't be invited to. Champagne in the foothills, oyster dip. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to be 10 years old again so I could believe in princesses and queens.